The biting cold clawed at Aimo Koivunen's face as bullets sliced through the air, barely missing him. The Finnish corporal felt like he was skiing through wet concrete. His comrades' shouts echoed in his ears, but his body was failing, muscles trembling uncontrollably, every breath tearing through his lungs like fire. The Soviets were closing in fast, and Aimo knew that if they caught him, he wouldn't just die, he would face something far worse. With nothing left to lose, Aimo's trembling hand reached for the bottle of stimulant pills buried in his pocket. They were his last hope, or his final mistake. Aimo closed his eyes and swallowed the pills. In today's episode of the Infographic Show, we'll reveal the unbelievable story of Aimo Koivunen, the soldier who OD'd on meth and defied death. It's mid-March 1944 in northern Finland. With war ravaging Europe, the Finns find themselves locked in a deadly struggle of survival. Soviet forces are relentless, seeking to annex Finland's northern territories at any cost. Both armies face a bitter stalemate, but in the unforgiving Arctic, Lapland holds the key to victory. Across the frozen tundra, a ruthless and unseen war rages, one where survival is as much the enemy as the opposing forces. The relentless snow renders tanks useless, and even aircraft rarely risk the skies. The snowbanks choke any attempt by light infantry to advance. This leaves ski patrols to clash in a deadly fight, trying to outflank each other in this frozen nightmare. Corporal Aimo Koivunen was looking forward to a long vacation at home. Having joined the Finnish army shortly after the Soviets invaded in 1939, Aimo has spent more than 4 long years in combat. Due to his extensive military and civilian skiing experience, he had joined the Ranger Battalion in 1942. This unit of highly skilled soldiers operated alone deep behind enemy lines to scout, harass, and patrol areas normal troops couldn't access. According to recent intelligence reports, the Soviets were conducting huge ski patrols deep inside Finnish territory between the village of Kantalahti and Alakurti. If taken, these towns could allow Soviet forces to encircle Finnish defenses in the region. Confirming this information and intercepting these patrols would at least buy time to figure out what the Soviets were planning. As Aimo was thinking about what he was going to do at home, his platoon commander, Lieutenant Nori, asked him to take part in a dangerous mission. Figuring this could be a big operation, Aimo canceled his leave and opted to join Lieutenant Nori on the mission. After skiing for over 2 days, the roughly 30-man group was near to the Soviets' last reported location. The weather was severe, with temperatures measuring 5 degrees Fahrenheit, but wind chill meant it was well below zero. The previous evening, the patrol had found ski tracks in the snow. The enemy were close by. The patrol split in two, with one group climbing a nearby hill, while the others lie in wait in a nearby tree line. They planned to ambush the Soviets, but very quickly the hunters became the hunted. Within minutes of climbing the hill, Aimo heard several shots crack through the still frozen air. Suddenly, an entire white-clad platoon of Soviet skiers emerged from the snow-covered landscape, rushing toward the Finns. As Aimo and his comrades fired at the Soviets to their front, another platoon of Soviets slipped in behind them, trapping them in a pincer movement. With enemy troops closing in on both sides, panic gripped the group. The patrol made a quick retreat, firing their weapons as they did, desperately trying to put as much distance between them and the Soviets as they could. Aimo was carrying ski track mines in his pack. He screamed at his comrades, pleading for covering fire so he could lay the traps. It was frantic. Bullets whizzed overhead. Aimo and his team emptied their magazines, trying to keep the Soviets at bay. Eventually, Aimo managed to lay the mines, but the enemy skied around them. The Soviets were relentless. Aimo knew they had to get out of there. If they stood their ground, it would be a massacre. Aimo gritted his teeth and charged to the front, determined to lay fresh tracks. The snow was knee-deep, which slowed the team down, all the while the Soviets were stalking them, hunting them. With all their attention now focused on survival, the Finns began skiing as fast as they could. However, the cold air and the days without a proper meal started to hit Aimo. His pace dropped, and he started to lag behind his platoon. His comrades urged him to keep up, but it was pointless. Each step became a struggle. As his men continued to pass him, Aimo reached into his pocket. In a little plastic bottle, there were 30 pills of Pervitin. Pervitin was essentially crystal meth in a pill form that was issued to all frontline Axis troops to help them stay awake and be more energized, with the ability to make a tired, hungry soldier not want to eat or sleep for days with just a single pill. It was a miracle drug. At that moment, Aimo needed an energy boost, something to keep him alive. But with his bulky snow gloves, it was impossible to grab a single pill. Instead, fearing the Soviets more than what Pervitin would do to his body, He swallowed all 30 pills. Almost instantly, Aimo felt a surge of energy course through his veins. The tiredness was gone. He felt alive, invigorated. He surged ahead of his comrades, getting faster and faster. But soon he came crashing back down to earth. His world began to get blurry. His final thought before blacking out was that this mistake may very well be his last. When Aimo finally came around a day or two later, he was alone. Still suffering from the effects of Pervitin, he searched his belongings. He had no ammunition, food, or water, and from his last memory he had skied over 100 kilometers from the battle site. Figuring that his best option was to head southwest, he set off again. However, he soon blacked out again and found himself tumbling down a hill. As Aimo struggled to his feet, he noticed smoke in the distance. It was a campfire, and that meant safety. Aimo began skiing headlong toward his comrades, or so he thought. As he got closer to the camp, he realized that it was the Soviets his platoon had engaged with a day or two before. But Aimo didn't stop. The Soviets simply stared in disbelief as he skied right through their camp, with some soldiers moving their feet out of the way to make room for him. After Aimo was almost clear of the camp, the Soviets sent a few pot shots his way, but by that point he was careening deep into the Finnish wilderness. Behind him, a Soviet ski patrol was pursuing, getting within 20 yards of Aimo as he climbed a hill. Aimo pushed on, reaching the top of the hill, where he took off at breakneck speed and finally shook his pursuers. However, the worst was still yet to come. For the next several days and nights, Aimo kept on skiing, only stopping to boil water for hot tea. To stave off hunger, Aimo resorted to ripping fresh pine tips from the trees and making them into a stew. With no end in sight to his journey, Aimo began to start seeing some strange things. One evening, as he was trying to get some sleep, he heard a wolverine circling him. With no ammunition for his submachine gun, Aimo pulled out his knife and goaded the animal to attack. After several minutes of this back and forth, the wolverine finally showed itself, snarling and snapping at Aimo. The wolf attacked, and Aimo charged headlong into it. With his knife, he repeatedly stabbed the beast until it was dead. Only it wasn't. In fact, there wasn't a wolverine at all. When Aimo came to, he realized that he had been repeatedly stabbing a tree. Later on, he hallucinated one of his friends leading him toward a tree line. Once inside it, he burst through the trees and came upon a hunting lodge. Aimo made himself right at home by starting a fire directly on the floor. Perhaps too exhausted to care about what was happening around him, he tried to fall asleep as the inferno grew. With the cabin destroyed, Aimo simply went to the sauna next door and started its furnace. Finally warm for the first time in almost a week, he fell asleep for almost a full day. Rested but still feeling the effects of the Pervitin, Aimo continued his journey and found a ski track in the snow. Sensing that this would be his best option for getting rescued, he continued along it until he saw barbed wire and guard shacks in the distance, realizing he had just found a German camp. In his drug-induced state, Aimo didn't realize the camp was abandoned. He thought that perhaps everyone was just sleeping or hiding. Aimo ventured in through the main gate looking for a guard, anyone who could help. After only taking about 20 steps, his body was rocked by a giant explosion. When he came to his senses, he felt a huge amount of pain coming from his left foot, or rather the bone and sinew that remained. He knew he had to get inside the shelter before he succumbed to shock and exposure. Seeing a dugout about 30 yards in front of him, he began to crawl toward it. Aimo painfully dragged himself to the solid wooden door, struggling to pry it open. As the door opened the first few inches, he could see darkness inside, and then another even more powerful explosion rocked his world. Seeing nothing but a bright flash of white light and his ears ringing, Aimo woke up 30 yards away from the dugout, still holding the door handle in his right hand. The Germans had booby-trapped the door, and there was now nothing left of it except the handle. Knowing now he was in really bad shape, he ripped off part of his shirt to bandage his shattered foot. As Aimo lay down in the dirt, he built a small fire to keep himself warm and to boil some water. That night, as he lay dying, he had a wonderful dream where he was in the hospital, nurses tending to his needs. But when he woke up, he was still in the dirt, bleeding and freezing where he was the previous day. Just when Aimo thought all hope was lost, he heard several gunshots. Sensing the Russians had found him, he picked up a nearby landmine to blow himself up to avoid being captured. However, there was soon an explosion and men speaking in Finnish shouting for a sled. Realizing that his countrymen were nearby, he dropped the mine and called for help. The Finnish patrol soon found him, and they told him that one of their sergeants had also stepped on a mine. But they needed to take him to the hospital first and they'd be back as soon as they could. Seeing the Finnish patrol leave him in the dirt, Aimo figured he was going to die. The next several days were a blur. He continued to drift in and out of consciousness only to wake up from either pain or extreme hunger. During one of those bouts of consciousness, he saw a Siberian blue jay approaching him. Aimo skewered it with his ski pole and devoured it raw. With his life ebbing away, he saw a German reconnaissance plane flying overhead. With every ounce of his strength left, he frantically waved his hat on top of his ski pole. The pilot tipped his wings, signaling he saw him. Sensing that rescue was close by, Aimo fell asleep one last time. Aimo was awakened by the shouts of Finnish soldiers. He responded he was still alive, and after German pioneer troops had cleared a path through the minefield, the Finnish soldiers put him into a horse-drawn sled. It was another 2 grueling days of travel until he arrived at a Finnish field hospital at 2 in the morning on the 1st of April 1944. When he arrived there, he weighed just 95 pounds, and his heart was still racing at 200 beats per minute from the massive dose of Pervitin he had taken. During his 2-week odyssey, Aimo had traveled an astonishing 400 kilometers while on enough speed for 30 men, being chased and shot at, and with 0 provisions in below-freezing conditions. Now go watch The Most Feared Soldier, the one-man army with 116 kills, or click on this video instead.